the one only Sputnik, bring you guys another gameplay commentary. This is Elder Scrolls Online. Yes, this is a blast from the past. This is a video I uploaded a long time ago, and YouTube did something to the audio. I think it was like a copyright issue, and they kind of muted the audio. So I decided to re-upload this, and it pertains a lot. The video pertains to, but it has a lot to do with this commentary. And this is my medium armor stamina DK. It's pretty much similar to my heavy armor DK. Nothing has really changed except for a few skills. And before I get into the commentary, I'll explain to you why. Most of you might not know this, but I think this was in September of 2015. Wow, I've played this game for a long time. This was September 2015, and this was right after 1.6. This was 1.7, and this build was made to counter two classes in this game. If you guys can guess what those two classes are, then great. But I'll just mention it now. The two classes that this build was set up to counter was Stamina Nightblades and Magical Sorks, because it was just rampant. So I had Fossilize on my front bar to counter Nightblades. The moment they go into stealth, I can still fossilize them, and that was something to counter them. I had Wings on my back bar to counter Magical Sorks. All right, and so this build was set up to do that, and of course a lot of defensive measures. But this commentary is not about what I set up to counter, right? It's more to just show you guys the natural progression of light, medium, and heavy, and how things are the way they are currently. And some people just have this false. People just, if you knew the history behind light, medium, and heavy, and not to say you don't, and not to say you don't have a relevant say or a relevant opinion, but in the past, light and medium shined. No one really used heavy that much. You know, the occasional, of course you had sword and board DKs, but the occasional Magicka DK that used heavy, you ran into those guys. But Magicka DK has always been good. So I honestly don't know why they're buffing it now. I can't imagine how many people will be running Magicka DK after the Homestead patch. It just amazes me. But look, that's my personal opinion. It doesn't mean you have to be influenced by it. But light and medium armor shine. Not a lot of people are using heavy, because heavy didn't play an important role in this game, because damage was so high that a lot of players it wouldn't make any sense to run heavy when you can just use a Magic Sword, stack your shields, for 20 seconds and not really have to worry about being tanky. And, you had some Magic Sorks running around with 15k health, and that was understandable because they had shields. And you saw a lot of that. You saw a lot of people using their PvP build and PvE, because as a Sork, you just use shields. It'd be fine. Some of them even had 12. Some of them even had like 1,200. I'm not 1,200, but 12,000 health. It was just mind-boggling. But if you thought of that now, you'd be like, that's kind of crazy. However, back then, shields were just really good. And the medium Nightblade just reigned supreme. The only thing that could stop them were Magicka Sorks and the occasional Magicka DK in open world. And 1v1 Magicka DK has always been up there in terms of dueling. So, and in groups. And so, I just want to stick to what I was saying. heavy didn't have a place. And if you've played any kind of role-playing game, this whole mindset that heavy should not do any damage is completely incorrect, because a lot of heavy armor players use greatswords. And the drawback was it would take you a while to use a greatsword. It wasn't instant, but it did really high damage. That's why Wrecking Blow was so good, because if you can land it, it did massive amount of damage. But they kind of nerfed it. They separated the abilities. In the past, Wrecking Blow used to do what Dizzying Swing did, as well as what the current Wrecking Blow does now, which is empower the second attack, and I think it's like 20% increase. So this whole notion that heavy should not do any damage, it's there, and people believe it, and so they go with it. So if you're in heavy armor, you definitely should not do any damage, and I don't think that's the case. I think if you're in heavy armor, you should do damage. You should do massive amount of damage. However, in order to land it, it would take time. It's not something that's instant. That's why I think the developers came out, had Wrecking Blow. If you wanted to land it, you can land it. If you can't, then you suffer. I think the rogue class, specifically like Nightblades and Medium, they should be what they are now, right? A lot of people dislike gankers, but they should be the way they are. They should be in the shadows. They should never be up front fighting and doing these things. But that was the case. You had Nightblades who could just really have high damage and high heals because they can just stack damage. And that mainly happened because of the nerf to dodge roll. So instead of people dodge rolling out of trouble and building for, sustain, they built for damage, because the longer the fight went on, the worse off you were. So if you can inflict so much damage on your opponent that then you don't have to worry about resources, because you're killing them fast enough that resource management is not really an issue. So now people are building for damage, and everyone's saying, wow, it's just too much damage, and heavy is not viable. So you have all of these players in PvP just getting one-shotted. You think damage is high now? Well, I feel as if I've done this commentary before. I think it's like deja vu or something. But if you think damage is high now, there were classes just blowing through you, specifically Nightblades and Magigosaurus. So people wanted to play heavy because they didn't want to die. They didn't want to get into a situation where, they were just getting one-shotted. That's why you see reactive, right? At 1.7, you saw reactive. You saw, they did things. You saw Shieldbreaker. They did things to counter a lot of the issues people had, and those things were Band-Aids. They had Shieldbreaker for people complaining about shields, or might not be complaining, but have disdain for Sorks. You had so many Sorks just running around like they were gods. And you saw reactive armor because of the Nightblades just CCing people. That's what I noticed. It might, you might think differently, but that's what I noticed. And so damage was really high, and heavy wasn't able to do anything particular. That's where you saw Black Rose. Not a lot of people used Black Rose because medium was still a viable thing, and there wasn't this emphasis on staying alive. It was more on just doing massive amount of damage. And I think the thing that really changed the way this game played, and this is just my personal opinion, I think, is the nerf to dodge rolling. Because instead of players building for sustain, they built for damage. And that completely changed the dynamic, because you already have a game that you're just taking so much damage already. And now you nerf one of the things that can kind of prevent the damage. And it's not a nerf to stamina per se. I think it was more of a hit to a lot of Magicka builds. Because in the past, they probably could have dodge rolled maybe 2 or 3 times. Now they can only dodge roll once, and that's it. And then you have these high weapon damage builds, especially Nightblades, Stamina Nightblades, just waiting to burst them down. It was a time where if you had 4K, 4.5K weapon damage, that's what Nightblades had. That was it. You blew through a person's shield, they can't dodge roll, and boom, that's it. They're dead. And that's how heavy became prevalent, because people just didn't want to die because the damage was so high. And the developers listened to them, and they came out with Black Rose, they came out with Reactive, and that kind of helped out. But then people still thought heavy wasn't competitive, and they added some passives that really made heavy competitive, and players started to realize, hey, if I'm not playing a Nightblade and I can't do damage, I can't animation cancel, I can't do a lot of things that really skilled players are doing, then I might as well be tanky. And then you saw like an increase in Magicka Templars. Right, Magicka Templars have always been really good. It's the same way with Magicka DKs, but for some reason it's the perception has kind of like shifted for both of them. No one really thinks a Magicka Templar is that dangerous, and people think Magicka DKs are underpowered. So it's sometimes it's just people double down on perception, and that can become a real issue. But back to what I was saying. So everyone now, they're building first to be tanky and still do damage. And slowly but surely you saw people moving away. Just keep in mind that damage is still high, but you saw people moving away from medium, light, and they're going to heavy to mitigate and also do damage. All right, and so that's the state heavy is in now, and also with the fact that they're making jewelry for a lot of these sets, people now have more flexibility and they can add a lot more diversity or meta to their builds. And in all of that, people still don't want to die. They do not want to die. They don't want to get one-shotted. And that's where the issue is. Instead of them, dealing with the damage, they didn't do that. They kind of put a Band-Aid on it. Zenimax, I'm referring to them. And so now you have this kind of disdain for heavy, when heavy wasn't the issue. Heavy has always been the bottom tier armor. Light and medium always overshadowed it, right? And so, and here's the thing: once you put a Band-Aid on something, it doesn't really help it. It's just temporary. So you have people who are rocking heavy, especially like Magicka Templars and Magic DKs, and you also have Stamina DKs, Sword and Board using heavy. These people already used heavy a long time ago. I remember, I forget his name, man. This guy was using heavy a long time ago. I think like in September. I forgot this guy's name, but he was a really good player at that time. I still think he plays this game. I think his name was like Noob, or I forgot his Noob something, or anyway. And so to put a Band-Aid on heavy, because heavy is now mitigating so much damage, what did they do? They come out with proc sets. And yet another Band-Aid, because people didn't feel as if they were doing enough damage because people were so tanky. So they pretty much wanted to find ways to Someone just sent me a party invitation. I'm not even online. And so to come back heavy, they now come out with a Band-Aid. And that is, like I said, proc sets. And so people went away now from actually doing damage to having damage procced. So they're not actually creating damage. So what happens when you take that away? It's no longer like these people who are accustomed to doing damage, that's gone. And so what happens? So you create a population that does not know how to inflict damage, and that's troubling. And I think that's why they didn't completely do away with proc sets. They just made them so they can't crit. So I think when you think about making changes to heavy, or making changes to a proc set, or making changes to medium, or making changes to light, or making changes to a particular class, think carefully about what the impact will be, because I'm noticing developers, and this isn't a knock to them. They have so many things to do. I'm not a coder. I play this game, but on the back end, I don't know what's going on. On the front end, I play the game, so I know what's going on from this point of view, but it's probably different for people who write codes and developers. And so when you see these changes, think about it. Is it a Band-Aid, or is it an actual change? Is it something that people really want, or are they just saying that on the surface, but underneath all of it, they actually enjoy what's going on? Anyway, this is the one only Despotic. Hopefully, this kind of blast from the past was helpful. Deuces.